Okay, guys, we have week 1, day 4 here. So if that's what you're looking for, you've come to the right place. And what you don't know is this is the 4th time through for me trying to get week 1, day 4 done because I keep making mistakes. So if you're making mistakes on the worksheet, don't feel bad. You just keep going back at it until you get this stuff right. And eventually it will start sinking in and making sense. And I'm hoping that every mistake that I made has sunk in and I can get through this lesson without having to do it again. All right, so let's get started. Capitalization. This week, or today, what we're looking at is that you should capitalize hyphenated proper nouns. They have the example there, pretty straightforward. Just a little note that da, and van are usually not capitalized. They go right into a sample sentence for you. All right. With the name being hyphenated, that would be your clue that the N in Nicholas and the J in Joseph are going to be hyphenated. Are going to be capitalized. And then the last name is capitalized because you always capitalize last names. And then you're also going to capitalize France because you remember that France is what? France is a proper noun. Good job. So that's the capitalization section. Moving on to punctuation. What we're reviewing today is apostrophes and how they're used in contractions and other words. All right. So we got to back up and make sure you know what a contraction is. A contraction is when you take two words and squish them together, put a little hyphen up there. So an apostrophe up there so that we know that there's a letter that's been omitted. So if you do something like was not, you squish it together and it becomes wasn't. Cannot, you squish it together and it becomes can't. All right, those are examples of contractions. You take two words and squish them together. The other example they have is when you have a full word like little in the example, and you squish it together and get rid of a few extra letters, and you put your apostrophe in there to show that you've skipped some letters. So little becomes lil. All right, so instead of little Ann, it's Lil Ann. Then they have another thing for you to pay attention to: underline or italicize words, letters, or numerals that are used out of context. So that would mean that something is in the sentence that's just being used for like an example. So your example is going to be an apostrophe. The apostrophe isn't needed in the sentence. It's just an example of what an apostrophe looks like. An exclamation point. What an exclamation point looks like. All right. So in their sample, they have erased that T completely. They have you underline the T so that the reader knows that that T isn't, a letter that's just floating out in space that ended up accidentally in your paper. That it's there. You're saying erase that T completely. Or if you're typing, you would put the T in italics. All right. So the sample sentence is you haven't used that required exclamation point in your sentence. Okay, so if you look here, you'll see that the O in not is missing. So we've taken have not, squished it into one word, got rid of the O, and it becomes haven't. All right, and you can see where the apostrophe is. And then it says you haven't used the required exclamation point in your paragraph. But instead of writing out the word exclamation point, they just used the symbol for it. But so that you know it's not just a crazy exclamation point floating around in your sentence, you underline it to alert the reader, I meant to put this there. Okay? If you were typing it, you could do the exclamation point in italics. Okay. Next, we're going back to phrases and clauses, and they're talking about participle phrases again. All right. This is good. The more that you hear about participle phrases, the more that you're going to remember what they are. And they're talking here about a participle phrase, and that is a couple of words put together that start with a participle. And in this example, they're going to do it in either the present tense or the past tense. All right. So the present participle is wearing. And I'm going to back you up for a minute. If the present participle is wearing, what is the infinitive form of the verb? Hopefully you knew it was to wear. All right, so the infinitive is to wear. The present participle is wearing, and the past participle is worn. Okay? So if you take that present participle and put it into a phrase, you would say something like wearing a costume, wearing a smile. If you take that participle phrase and put it into past tense, they give you an example here, and that would be worn, worn as a decoration. Okay? So now, here's a bonus alert, bonus alert, bonus alert. You can get an extra bonus point on this worksheet if you tell me if the verb to wear is either a regular verb or an irregular verb. And if you get it right, you'll get an extra point. Now, for their example, they use the infinitive to drive, right? So they want a participle phrase using the present participle. So the first thing you have to do is go, what's the present participle of to drive? Okay, hopefully you said driving. All right, so then you need to come up with a phrase, driving a car, driving me crazy, all right? But it's starting with the present participle, drive. Then they ask for a participle phrase using the past participle of drive. And the past participle of drive is driven, okay? Driven. So you might have driven with greed, or driven by greed, or driven by fury, or driven with care. All right, but the clue here is that your phrase starts with the participle. Okay, so again, the participle was to drive, and you are making a participle phrase using the present and past participle of that infinitive. Okay, good job. That stuff starts to get a little bit harder, so you're doing great. Next, we have parts of speech, nouns. A singular noun adds an apostrophe plus S to show possession. All singular nouns, including those that end in S, add apostrophe S. Some people still teach that you don't need the apostrophe S if it ends in S, but that's kind of gotten put by the wayside over the years. So just to be sure that you're correct, go with the apostrophe S, whether the word ends in S or not, okay? And they have an example there. But I would say for my writing class, I would like for you to do the S apostrophe S, like the example of Gus's truck. All right, so now you've got a little bit different type of a question here. What we have is they want you to take the noun showing possession and the items possessed, and they want you to show possession by using an apostrophe S. So they have bike trails in a city. So bike trails in a city, who do those bike trails belong to? They belong to the city. So you're going to show that the possession, the city owns the bike trails. All right, so how you're going to do that is cities, apostrophe S, bike trails. The bike trails belong to the city. They are the city's bike trails. And then the second example talks about horses belonging to Bess. Who possesses the horses? Bess does. They are Bess's horses. Okay, so they did the one with the S, and I already told you that if it ends with S, I still want you to use the apostrophe S. So it would be written like that, Bess's horses. All right, then the last section, you have two sentences to combine into one. No run-ons. Good luck. I'll check them when you hand them in.